We're continuing with Chapter 36 of Barry and the Boys, the CIA, the Mob, and America's Secret History by Daniel Hopsicker. Paul, Helliwell, the company, and Mina. The details of Barry Seal's very public fall from favor during his last 2 years are well known. Seal spent his last days on Earth testifying at the trials of small fry in the narcotics industry, as well as fending off law enforcement in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As his star went into eclipse, we wondered if we could catch a glimpse of the shadowy organization behind him, hovering in the background. As we had pursued our investigation into where the money goes in what we had come to see as the covertly nationalized illegal narcotics industry, we came to understand the words of a courageous U.S. Attorney, Joe Cage, who had eventually won conviction of the man known as Carlos Marcello's banker, Herman Beebe. After painstakingly unraveling Beebe's deliberately tangled affairs for a grand jury, we'd have to say 10 issues trying to get them resolved with the grand jury, he remembered, and in solving those 10, another 15 would come up. It was like trying to nail jelly to the wall. Nailing jelly to the wall was an apt characterization for our pursuit of Trinity Energy, until we discovered the Tony Coelho ICF Kaiser connection. At that point, we found ourselves shocked at the appalling lack of tradecraft displayed by people who think themselves masters of the universe. Then again, maybe these people felt safe because nobody has been looking very hard into anything much beyond discussions of differing campaign styles of this year's presidential contenders in America's media for some time now. The result was that Trinity Energy had ended its utility as a money laundering vehicle in the arms of a Washington, D.C. company which, we learned, was filled with former Pentagon officials. And its chairman was Democratic fundraiser and power broker Tony Coelho, known as Charles Manatt's political protege. And Manatt, according to the note in Barry Seal's own handwriting we had discovered, had been Gene Glick's attorney. Was Glick the cutout between Seal, Manatt, and the agency? Or was former DNC chairman Manatt, who author and activist Michelle Rupert pointed out is today the current U.S. ambassador to one of the biggest Caribbean conduits for narcotics into the U.S., the Dominican Republic, a CIA asset or agent all along? Based on the evidence developed so far, we believe it is fair to ask if Manatt's duties in the Dominican Republic include things like overseeing the smooth and effective functioning of the narcotics apparatus. Dale Wamstad's story offered one clue. He had connections to company principal Jimmy Lambert and roots in the Louisville, Kentucky setting of many of the company's activities. Wamstad had also numbered among his longtime associates a man, Al Copeland, founder of the Popeyes chicken chain, whose meteoric business success was suspected. The head of intelligence for the Louisiana State Police had told us of having been aided by contact with associates of Barry Seal. Who or what was behind the organization with the same name, the company, as the nickname of the CIA? The company was a drug smuggling organization whose tentacles reached into the state houses of numerous southern states. We'd learned from Sally Denton's excellent Bluegrass Conspiracy. The man who had dinner with Barry Seal the night before he died, a longtime business associate, was, we learned, a good friend of a company figure, Colonel Jim Atwood, referred to in the Bluegrass Conspiracy as a shadowy spook who controlled several companies used for international gun deals, including one which turned out the popular lightweight SM-90 machine gun. which we were told were manufactured at 2 locations in Bolivia and then ferried over the Andes by seal to buyers in Honduras, Colombia, and Panama. The gun was especially popular, according to Denton, with gun runners and drug smugglers. Had Seal, Antwood et al., working under the supervision of the shadowy National Security Agency, armed both the Colombian drug cartels as well as the supposedly communist rebel group? The preponderance of evidence says yes. Denton demonstrated Colonel Antwood's links to the company. Seal's NSA contract in Bolivia had also been involved with the cocaine trade as drug lord Robert Suarez, handler after having married a close relative of Suarez. Reputed company head Robert Nichols had deep ties to the NSA in his own testimony in a lawsuit against the Justice Department filed by Inslaw Corporation. Robert Nichols told about an incident in the early 1980s when a colonel from the NSA headquarters at Fort Meade, Maryland, allegedly flew out to the Cabazon Reservation for the day for the single purpose of assuring that FBI agents investigating a triple homicide of the vice chairman of the Cabazon tribe and 2 associates did not attempt to probe the classified U.S. government work being performed under the auspices of the Wackenhut Cabazon joint venture. Why, we wondered, and not for the first time was there murder around these guys all the time. Let's indulge in a little conspiracy theorizing. Could it be that the NSA, and not the CIA, as is commonly thought, is the secret team responsible for the explosion in the cocaine trade during Barry Seal's tenure during the 1980s? Ah, the secret team. I'll be reading that very soon for you. Might the NSA's rumored license to kill, be the reason that the scandals of Iran-Contra and Whitewater were never truly exposed? Atwood, to be sure, was an integral part of what became known as Iran-Contra, and the focus of a congressional investigation into arms dealing. Retired Major General Richard V. Secord and his partner working with a shadowy former Army colonel who later helped them sell arms to the CIA, last year tapped an Iran bank account in Switzerland to invest at least $60,000 in a venture to sell submachine guns to the Contras and others. Reliable sources said Friday. The LA Times reported on December 31st, 1987. LA might be Louisiana, but I'm not sure. It just says LA. Retired Army Colonel James P. Atwood of Savannah, Georgia, successfully brokered the CIA purchase from the enterprise after another middleman's effort had failed. At the time, investigators discovered Atwood was helping set up a private arms business for the son of a CIA covert procurement official who was approved the deal as part of a highly unusual scheme to generate a multi-million-dollar surplus for companies secretly owned by the CIA, sources have told the Times. Moreover, a series of congressional depositions of CIA employees and others revealed that Atwood had curried favor with CIA covert procurement officials in the past, with personal gifts varying from watches and buckets of shrimp to rare chrome-barreled Chinese AK-47 rifles. At least one covert procurement official quietly returned a desk pen set to Atwood in a brown paper sack. More often, however, the gifts were not returned, the paper said. The financial details uncovered by Iran-Contra investigators about Atwood were compared by one official close to the probe to the organized crime money laundering scheme. The mob is probably better at it than anyone else, but these guys weren't bad, said a source familiar with the scheme. It's a textbook example of how things could go south without proper management controls. The arms deal was investigated by independent counsel Lawrence Walsh, and although officials said they believed it could yield new evidence of the financial and personal ties linking the CIA, North, and his army of private operatives in the Iran-Contra scandal, it quietly died. As the French say, quelle surprise, what a surprise. Then came a revelation from an unexpected source. We heard from the daughter of a friend who had begun work as a bank teller in Louisiana. During a training course for tellers, they had shown a training film on Monday, laundering laws, using footage of Barry Seal to make the point. When Barry Seal's face had flashed across the TV monitor, one teller trainee exclaimed, "I know that man. He worked with my father." After class, our young friend met her new co-worker and heard her story. Her father was a native Colombian who moved to Barry Seal's hometown of Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1975. There he owned a seafood market restaurant named for his wife, Laura's Restaurant and Oyster Bar. Less than a week before Barry Seal's murder, he received a visit from a group of FBI agents at his home, his daughter said, called his family together, told them he loved them, and vanished forever. Years later, his family learned that he had moved to Costa Rica, where he had a second wife and owned several prosperous businesses. Weeks later, we met the daughter of this vanished SEAL associate and were surprised to learn that this man's new wife in Costa Rica is a Russian translator. More mere coincidence? Or had this man, along with SEAL and the others, had some connection to the federal agency called Shadowy, so often it could be in its title, the Shadowy NSA, the same agency so clearly behind the drug smuggling organization calling itself the Company? How America had first learned of the existence of the Company bears retelling. A man with a dark mustache, wiry build, and incredibly bad timing walked into the Acapulco Mexican restaurant in Fort Lauderdale one night at the tail end of a raucous party, an FBI party. One of the agents recognized a man ordering a margarita as perhaps the most wanted drug fugitive in America. And that's how the FBI investigative pit bulls that they are captured Richard Dial Thorpe, the chairman of the board of the biggest made-in-America drug ring ever uncovered. Headquartered in the heartland outside St. Louis, birthplace of Alvin Malnick, the company launched in 1976 and grew to an enterprise with over 350 employees, with separate executives in charge of buying airports, leasing warehouses, and even giving polygraph tests to new employees. There was even a $2 million fund for bail. In just 2 years, the company had acquired 33 planes, 3 airports, warehouses in 7 states, and profits of $48 million. 1976 was also the year, according to Barry's widow, Deborah, when Barry Seal's smuggling career began. Where had the expertise come from to create such an elaborate organization? Vietnam, apparently. Thorpe had gotten used to taking risks as a door gunner on a U.S. Army helicopter. He also got well acquainted with drugs. Just how connected was, or maybe is, the company? When a Colombian Army unit caught a company pilot and crew in Smuggler's Alley in Guajira, Guajira, Guajira Peninsula, the company promptly paid $200,000 to arrange a jailbreak while bribing the local power company to turn out the lights as an army colonel and the local police chief walked the prisoners out of jail. The local Colombian press blamed the CIA. Another example occurred in the steamy climes of South Carolina. Where to weed out informants, the company had hired a local security chief, a South Carolina man who had once worked as a lie detector examiner for the congressional subcommittee investigating the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Later, when a company member, a prominent lawyer and congressional candidate in South Carolina, violated protocol and recruited someone who had not taken the requisite lie detector test, retribution was swift. Charleston County Deputy Sheriff G. Lloyd Woodbury, former employee of the State Disaster Preparedness Agency, DPA, who provided international security for the company, threatened and intimidated former Darlington County Democratic Party Chairman John R. Etheridge into pleading guilty to state and federal charges. That's clout. Soon the company's pilots, seasoned commercial flyers, and at least one Vietnam War hero were flying 10-ton loads of high-grade Columbia marijuana into Missouri, Georgia, and South Carolina. On Thorpe's 31st birthday, the company threw a party at a private country club in Fort Lauderdale, where 300 celebrants arrived by Learjet and limousine, dined and smoked salmon, caviar, and a round of beef, and sampled Dom Perignon and their own wares to keep things festive. During a 2-year investigation by the DEA, which determined the company owned marijuana valued at $1 billion, agents watching the huge smuggling ring learned that the company was peering right back at them. When they began busting the ring, they discovered how sophisticated that scrutiny had been. They had the secret radio frequencies of federal, state, and local authorities, a DEA spokeswoman said. They had mechanical programmers and night viewing devices. They had air-to-ground radios so sophisticated we don't even have them on our own planes. They had electronic geniuses in their employ capable of making their own equipment or modifying it to meet their own designs. The defendants would employ the services of skilled electronics experts using counterintelligence equipment to identify and remove electronic tracking devices from aircraft used in smuggling operations, according to the indictment. Prominent company members included Drew Thompson, who died in 1985 trying to parachute into Knoxville, Tennessee with a load of cocaine that he had flown into Colombia, drug smuggler and convicted weapons dealer Bradley Bryant, Henry S. Vance, a former Kentucky gubernatorial and legislative aide, convicted of supplying the gun used to murder a Florida prosecutor, Harold Brown, disgraced DEA regional director in Louisville, who died in apparent suicide, and Jimmy Lambert, drug supplier to Lexington's Horsey Set, a close friend of former Governor John Y. Brown, Jr., and buddy, as we've heard, of Dale Wamstead. Sally Denton's Bluegrass Conspiracy said that the company members played central roles at the highest levels of the international narcotics trade, corrupted top officials of Kentucky government and of federal and state law enforcement agencies, had access to U.S. military installations, supplied arms to Central America and perhaps Libya, and had shadowy connections to the Central Intelligence Agency and the DEA. Our NSA informant, who'd had dinner with Barry the night before his murder, had visited Libya several times, he told us casually in conversation, most often with Reagan's ambassador to the Vatican, William Wilson. This turned out to be the truth. Wilson was forced to resign from his ambassadorship when newspapers revealed his secret trip to Libya in 1986. The company was said to have trained a private army on a farm named Triad, and to have been responsible for the murders of informants, prosecutors, a federal judge, and numerous drug couriers and other criminal associates. Denton's unspoken but unwavering conviction seemed to be that Kentucky Governor John Brown was part of this large criminal enterprise, that he and his administration had protected criminals and interfered with honest law enforcement officials, and that Brown had presidential aspirations that attracted strong underworld backing. But Kentucky Governor Brown was only one of a number of Southern governors. Was but Kentucky Governor Brown was only one of a number of Southern governor being corrupted by the drug trade. An eyewitness told us Louisiana Governor Edwin Edwards received so much cash from Barry Seal that it required 3 separate flights in a private King Air 200 to get all the money safely out of the country. The company's reach was national in scope. Brian Leighton, an assistant U.S. attorney in California, prosecuted several top members in Fresno for stealing specialized military equipment, infrared sniper scopes, television cameras capable of taking pictures in darkness, tracer ammunition for night combat, a remote control helicopter, and other even more secret components like the radar unit of a Sidewinder guided missile from the U.S. Naval Weapons Station at China Lake in the Mojave Desert. Stories of spies, stolen arms, and drugs read the headline in the San Francisco Chronicle on April 28, 1982. The company consisted of about 300 members, many of them former military men or ex-police officers with nearly $30 million worth of assets, including planes, ships, and real estate, the article stated. Here was a group of over 300 people, most of them ex-law enforcement and ex-military, ex-intelligence people involved in a major drug and smuggling operation. Federal agents said the stolen equipment was used to make electronic equipment for drug smugglers and drug suppliers in Colombia. 29 members of the company were indicted by a Fresno federal grand jury in 1981. Among them, Andrew Drew Thornton, 40, the former narcotics officer who had set his plane on automatic pilot before parachuting to his death with 77 pounds of cocaine. The Los Angeles Times published a story on Thornton's death called "Former Narcotics Officer Parachutes Out of Plane, Dies with 77 Pounds of Cocaine." Assistant U.S. Attorney Leighton told them, "I'm glad his parachute didn't open. I hope he got a hell of a high out of that." These people were smuggling large amounts of drugs into the United States, Leighton says. He stated his office investigated Thornton for the theft of military equipment from China Lake Naval Weapons Center, and that company member and close friend of Colonel Atwood, Bradley Bryant, was offered a contract to kill U.S. Judge John Wood of San Antonio. Although Bryant turned the contract down, he did work for the man eventually convicted of killing Wood in 1978, Jimmy Chagra. One well-placed source had told us that the company developed out of a CIA old boy network involved in illegal gun and drug trade as far back as World War II. This dovetailed perfectly with reports we had received about meetings set up the Mena, Arkansas's drug and weapons pipeline having been held on Congressman John Hammerschmidt's ranch. Attendees reportedly included Barry Seal, National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft, and Congressman Hammerschmidt. Hammerschmidt was, of course, the congressman from the district encompassing Mena. There sat the Mena airport, looking like an ordinary, normal airport, save for the row upon row of hangars housing aircraft, refitting facilities, and industry in demand by just 2 principal paying customers, the CIA and drug smugglers. A search through Hammerschmidt's bio for clues to why he might have been called on to play such a role reveals his previously hidden connections. He had been, in 1966, a part of a large GOP freshman class, where he quickly became close friends with another freshman from Houston, George Bush. John Paul Hammerschmidt, in fact, is one of George Bush's very close friends, and the Arkansas's president campaign manager for both the Bush campaign in '76 and again in 1980. Hammerschmidt was also, we learned, a much decorated pilot in the China-Burma-India theater of World War II. And that's when we said bingo. OSS CIA agent Paul Helliwell, the man who got the CIA into the drug business after watching the British trade opium, was prominent in Burma during World War II, where the Wall Street Journal had reported he often paid for information with 3 sticky bars of opium. Paul Helliwell, as we will see in the next chapter, was the ultimate owner of the agency of Barry Seal's most prized possession, his Learjet. We were looking at the secret group that ran the largest operation ever to smuggle narcotics into America. When we reached Hammerschmidt by phone to ask him about the meeting in Harrison and his association with Helliwell, he would say only, "I knew a lot of people during World War II. Helliwell may have been one of them." Like then U.S. Attorney Asa Hutchinson, Hammerschmidt turned a blind eye to the activities at Mina. During the height of the smuggling through the airport, a deputy sheriff in Mina sent Hammerschmidt a moving appeal, beseeching him to help an investigation going into the crimes being committed right in his district. John Paul Hammerschmidt, congressman, Contra supporter, and close friend of George Bush, never replied. That's it for today's little bit of a chapter. Not too bad. See you next time.